Ryan, how did you get started doing Rage Ministries? Today, I want to answer that for you by sharing our story right now. If I'm honest, Rage Ministries really began before 2003. If I'm gut level honest, Rage Ministries really began before I even knew Jesus. Now, I grew up in a small East Texas town called Wascom, a town at that time of about 1,800 people, small to a school where literally everybody knew everybody. Growing up in that town, I spent most of my Sundays in First Baptist Church of Wascom, Texas. And my pastors growing up were always hugely evangelistic. As a matter of fact, one of my favorites, Pastor Jim Walsh, was indeed an evangelist. So I believe the desire to proclaim the gospel, the desire to tell people about Jesus, was really put in me before Jesus was in me. You see, even though I grew up in church, it wasn't till the age of 18 that I said yes to Jesus as my King, that I surrendered my life to Jesus as Lord and invited Him in to have my entire life. That moment that I said yes to Him as King, everything really changed for me. I tell people the day that I was saved was the day I felt called to ministry, the day that I felt Jesus calling me out of what I was pursuing in college and into what He wanted me to pursue for the rest of the days of my life. Not only did God put great pastors in my life that were evangelists, but also God put a student pastor in my life who was critical in leading me to Jesus, Doug Kennedy, and he had a passion for telling people about Jesus as well. So when I said yes to Jesus as King and surrendered my life to ministry, there was this call in my life that I thought I'd be a student pastor and telling teens about Jesus in the local church forever. And indeed, that's what happened. A year later, I was a part-time student pastor at a church in Shreveport, Louisiana, as I was going to East Texas Baptist University pursuing my undergraduate degree, and spent 3.5 years there. Then God would take me and my wife up to Memphis, Tennessee, where I would pursue my Master's of Divinity at Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary. It was there that God continued to stir and to stoke up the fires of evangelism in my life. Not only had I grown up with pastors that were evangelistic, but the first pastor I served with in Shreveport, Rocky Maddox, was an evangelist as well. Then, as I go to Memphis, Tennessee, I'm at a school that is serious about people telling people about Jesus, and the fire for personal evangelism was lit by Dr. Gray Allison. I'm telling you, throughout my life, God has put men and women in my life who have stoked up the fires of evangelism. Then, after being a part-time student minister at an inner city church in Memphis, Tennessee, God would take me to a meeting one day in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, in the year 2000, Billy Graham Conference for International Preaching Evangelists. It was there one night, lying in my barracks, that God sealed a call on my life to be an evangelist. But it wasn't until 3 years later, in 2003, after one more stop as a student pastor in South Haven, Mississippi, that God really gave me the faith to step out and pursue full-time evangelism. Rage Ministries was really sparked out of Judges chapter 2 and verse 10. In my reading one day, I came across that verse and the verse came alive. And that verse says this: "There grew up a generation after them who did not know the Lord, nor what He had done." And in that moment, I said, that's the generation behind us and behind that generation, and we are going to give everything we can to go after them. So for 7 years, I would travel full time. I would preach the gospel. I would learn. I would grow. I would expand our ministry, and God would do incredible things. But in 2010, God called me to replant or revitalize a church in Keller, Texas, and it was there that Rage Ministries would move from full-time focus of mine to a part-time focus on mine. So I spent 8 years there as lead pastor, yet still part-time, having this burning, this desire, this passion to continue to reach the next generation. So instead of doing 8, 9, 10, 12 camps a summer, I would do 3 or 4. And instead of doing 3 weekends a year, a month, I would do 1, maybe 2. And it was in the season that God literally took me to be a lead pastor and see a church move from death to life, to from sickness to health. And then toward about the 7th or so year, I just sensed God was doing something, and I didn't know if I was supposed to go plant another church or revitalize another church or exactly what it was. But after a season of prayer and fasting and seeking the Lord with my wife and the elders of our church, I knew God had never released me from the call to reaching a generation endangered. And in 2019, we were able to be part of handing the baton off to the next lead pastor and start traveling full-time with Rage Ministries once again, going after a generation that is desperately in need of Jesus. So Ryan, how did Rage Ministries all begin? Well, it began a long time ago, and we've got a long way to go. But I believe God is not done, because there are still people around the globe that need Jesus. There are teenagers everywhere who need to hear about Jesus and need to be equipped to tell their friends about Jesus. And that is the passion of Rage Ministries, to reach a generation endangered, a generation that is in desperate need of Jesus. Where are we going over the next 5, 10 years? God has given us a vision called 1 Million Cents, where we will see 1 million teens around the globe equipped to share the gospel, to share the good news of Jesus in their everyday life. The key to reaching the next generation is engaging the next generation by the next generation. So we're going to equip, we're going to preach, we're going to proclaim, and we're going to prepare. Why? Because there is still a generation right in front of us right now that is in desperate need of Jesus. They do not know the Lord. They do not know what He's done. And Lord, until we go home, we will give everything we've got to make sure Judges 2:10 is never said of another generation again. And it is not something we can do alone. That's why our hashtag is not I am Rage, but we are Rage. Because reaching a generation endangered, as we like to say, is not a me thing, it's a we thing. So let's together continue to reach a generation endangered together.